you know, because in Chicago it had never quite grossed me out that much. But then in Chicago, it was never quite as gross. It wasn't quite as poor as those southern people.
I guess that still exists too in East St. Louis.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure, but they may have tore it all down and built up high rises or something, which are scuzzy too. I'm sure.
What'd you do after that? That was after your period of touring in the South?
Right, and all over the Midwest. Then I was sort of like a folklorist, and I was really into discovering blues singers who had been famous in the past. And I mean famous, like guys that were the James Browns of their days. And I had noticed in New York there were record companies reissuing. I'm not reissuing, but discovering these dudes and putting out their records again. Prestige, Bluesville, Folkways, Riverside at that time. And so I went and discovered me as many famous old... This has become a big business now, the blues revival business. You know, there's magazines.
Who were some of the...
Well, there's a guy named Washboard Sam who was a big star in Bluebird in his time. He wrote Outskirts of Town and Mama No Lano Guitar Playing in Here. And a guy named Tampa Red, a guy named Tommy McLennan. These may mean nothing to you, but in black music in the 30s and 40s, these were the... you know, the Sly Stones of their time. And I went around and found them and befriended them, and they befriended me and taught me shit. And
Where were they? Mostly in Chicago?
Chicago, Memphis, Mississippi, St. Louis. I mean, I was looking for Charlie Patton, Robert Johnson, I mean, whoever.
Yeah.
And there were people, there were other white people I found out that were in this business as well, and we sort of gathered together. And then, but see, I was a musician. After a while, I would just rather be playing the music than folkloring it, you know.
Were you scouting for any company or anything, or just
No,
on your own?
Just on my
And
own.
what would you do when you found somebody?
I would call up the companies that were recording them and see were they interested in recording these people.
And did they, as black people, accept you as a white guy coming down there?
Because I could play as good as them. That was always the trip. See, if that was the trip in Chicago. I mean, if you had to be good to make it. White was not enough. And if you were good in white, then you were better than black because you were a freak then, and they could advertise you as a freak. You know, come see.
The record companies?
No, the clubs, the nightclubs. They would have Paul Butterfield playing at this club. You know, a white harp player, sing the blue. You know, really far out. Come see our white soul brother or whatever. I'm sure how the Righteous Brothers did it in Compton when they first started out. You know, Blue-Eyed Soul Brothers. It was a freak show, and so you had to be good to become a freak. To be good, you had to be a white nigger. You had to look it and talk it and play it, and so. It was like there was a lot of cutting going on. I don't mean knife cutting, but I mean going up on the stage and trying to blow. I would be in a club and there would be Otis Rush and Magic Sam and Freddie King all in the club that night. It would be a Blue Monday party, talent night, and I would want to go up there and just burn them off the stage, man. Just say, cut them to ribbons, you know. And if you could do that, you would get their gigs, and then they would get mad at you, and so it went, you know.
What's it like feeling that kind of virtuosity then? I mean, knowing you.
Well, everyone else was good too. I mean, you really didn't say, "Hey, I'm so super bad," blah blah blah, because there was always someone that was about to be as super bad as you coming up. So I never noticed virtuosity. I mean, I always knew I was good and took it for granted because there were always good people around me or better people, and I always wanted to play like them. I never knew about it till I read a review in Crawdaddy many years later. Like when I was like 23 years old and done the Butterfield East-West album. And they were talking about rock and roll guitar in America and putting it in the sort of folklorist perspective that I had always put music into, but had never really looked at myself in that way. And then I knew I was really hot shit from reading that interview. That record review Paul Williams had written. But at that time, I mean, as good as I may have been, there was always somebody that was as good as me. And,
Who did you admire?
Everyone around. I mean, all the great Chicago blues guys that lived in the area.
Did Paul Butterfield band start off playing black gloves or something?
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, Paul was the white guy that most had transcended the color line. He had actually turned into a nigger, man. He carried a gun. He was dangerous. He would kick ass faster than he would shake hands. He would kick anyone's ass. He lived in the ghetto. He was raised in Hyde Park, which is not the ghetto, but right on the fringe neighborhood.
He grew up poor.
Huh? No. But he chose from his earliest years to hang out in the toughest, baddest, no white areas. I mean, a white man would get killed, and he would just take his whatever it took to hang out there, and he would hang out there, and he had completely transcended the color line, and God knows. I mean, he never played any. I mean, I remember him turning him on to his first non-white gigs, where they paid a little better, and he was sort of suspicious about it. And then, we,
You mean non-black gigs?
I mean, non-black
Yeah.
gigs, yeah. And he took him, but
How did you meet him?
Oh, we had all hung around the University of Chicago, which had a folklore society, and it was right in this fringe, Hyde Park, which is a sort of integrated neighborhood in Chicago, probably the only one in Chicago, integrated neighborhood. And we all hung around the university because they had funky music around there, and they had this folklore society. And I never liked Paul because he was much too rough, much too street for me, and much too dangerous a guy. And even when I got in a band with him, I didn't like him. It took a long, long time until we had mutual respect for each other as players. And Paul gradually started softening up. He realized he did not have to be that streetwise and that street nasty, street hustler when he was around a bunch of hippies and dope. We took acid, and he was still toting his gun and shit. So he realized it was completely unnecessary. And now he's just like the mellowest guy that ever
Are you still in
lived.
touch with him?
Oh, sure.
Do you ever play with him?
Sure.
What was it
But
like?
this was many years ago.
Yeah.
He hasn't been this way in, a decade.
This was about 65 or 64.
65 or 64, yeah.
And then you began, then the psychedelic era came in.
Right.
And you were playing around Berkeley, weren't you?
No, we went on the road with the Butter Band. We had a blues band, and we came to San Francisco, and we were acid heads, ourselves, and we heard the music here and thought it was just utter garbage, completely unprofessional. Obviously, folkies who had picked up electric instruments about a year ago and were no way rooted. I mean, I had been playing professional rock and roll since I was 15 years old, sessions, playing with, and these people hadn't, and I was sort of very disillusioned with the music scene here.
Who do you mean particularly?
The Airplane, the Dead, Quicksilver, Charlatans. The only group here that impressed me that was indigenous to this area was Moby Grape. They obviously had grown up with rock and roll too and were real professional players. And I remember writing about that and getting a lot of flack from Ralph Gleason and various people. Because as I said, I thought these people were dog shit.
You wrote about it in...
I didn't write. I was quoted in Rolling Stone in various places. Though I loved the ambience and I loved the neighborhood and whatnot. I love this area of the country. I loved the whole Haight Street scene. I loved taking acid. I loved all that pussy. I didn't think they could play very well.
Did they get better, or obviously they have a pretty good reputation on this?
I never liked it.
You still don't?
No, I still don't. Though I've always liked the people.
Did you know Janis Joplin?
Real well.
Yeah, what can you say anything about her?
Well, she was great. I always thought she was great.
Did she transcend the color line just like Paul
No.
Barkley?
No. Well, I'll give you a good example. We played, I was an arranger for her band, and we were in Memphis playing on the Watt Stax Memphis Review, and she bombed. I mean, she did not transcend the color line. She tried her valiantest, but there it was, this show, Albert King, Carla Thomas, Rufus Thomas, Johnny Taylor, who had a big hit then, who's making love to your old lady while you're out making love. And Janis came up there with her band, and I had practiced all day with them at the Stax Studios. And
Was that Big Brother?
No, this was a Full Tilt, not Full Tilt, but a band right after Big Brother with horns and everything.
Yeah.
And I was offered a job by a Motown producer that day as he saw me working with this hippie band, trying to get him to play like colored players and all this shit. And this guy named Don Davis, who had produced Johnny Taylor, said, "Hey, you're good, man," and offered me a job. And Janis went on that night and bombed. And she couldn't do it.
Well, what's the atmosphere like when she bombed? Like, there's no electricity in there?
Yeah, they bombed. They just sort of stared and wondered and very, vague applause. She did not. Janis too. I mean, she was a very funky, good blackish singer. But the whole trip isn't singing. It's an interplay. It's a lexicon. It's a language that must be understood by both the artist and the audience. If you've ever seen a gospel concert or if you've ever been to a bullfight, you would understand that to be an aficionado, you really have got to understand the whole language of what's going on, all the nuance. And appreciation is oral, like in a gospel show. If someone hits a hot lick right then, you don't wait till it's over to applaud. Well, that kind of thing, And I don't think Janis was real well versed in that language of call and response, which is so necessary to get it on with black people, or with any sort of indigenous ethnic sort of music that has its rules of call and response. I mean, even if it was hillbilly music, whatever it was, you would have to know what the language was, what was the nuance, the fine things to, get over.
How did she feel when she?
She was very, very upset.
She did she ever try again?
No.
No. She really.
No,
she feel that the white audience was really her audience after that.
It was a mixed audience, integrated audience, and yeah, I don't know what she felt.
That was about '69.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, she was all fucked up, man. She was a junkie and an alkie and messed up and everything.
Was she really? I thought that.
Yes, she was.
Everybody
really.
thought that she was just
she was a
Southern Comfort.
She was a drug fiend alcoholic. I know, man. I don't know, but I shot much dope with her.
You did?
Yeah. So I'm for a fact. I mean, I sat in her apartment and got high with her countless times. Heroin, shooting it, yeah. And so I definitely can attest to the truth that she was definitely a dope fiend.
What happened to you? Did you get off it, or were you hooked, or what?
I never quite got addicted because I was too enamored of creature pleasures. I mean, I like to eat and fuck, and I like to. Heroin takes up a lot of time. Yeah. You get high, you're stoned for like acid. You're stoned for 14 or 15 hours, and you're hours to combat. You're out of it for a long time, unless you have a bad Jones, and then you function. You don't get sick. And to get high, you have to do all that much more. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the inclination to stay high that much. It wasn't that important. So I would space it out. So I never, though I nearly died. I mean, there was 4 years where I would have definitely, took so many overdoses and woke up in hospitals. But I never did get addicted. Like, next day, if I didn't have it, I would not get sick. That sort of, but psychologically addicted,